It's a new year, and market opportunities are coming from an unusual part of the market. Let's take a look today on the weekly update.
Okay, so let's talk regulation change. Now, I know with a title like that, this sounds unfathomably dry, but I actually think this is going to be one of the more interesting ones that we're going to do. So let's take a look. Here's what you need to know. Regulatory change is a big theme for 2024, and this is something that I'm taking very seriously. Mainly, I'm focusing on two things. One is the possibility of the SEC allowing a Bitcoin ETF. We're expected to hear about this as soon as tonight. Currently, it's Wednesday at roughly noon. And what I'm showing you here on screen, this is the infamous tweet from yesterday. It came from the SEC's Twitter handle, where they basically, they were hacked and they said, oh, we're approving a Bitcoin ETF. And then, of course, they had to come out and say, no, we were hacked. We haven't approved anything yet, but we're expected to see the actual approval, the first one, as soon as tonight. Second thing that I'm focusing on is what's going on with the DEA and Health and Human Services, basically around cannabis rescheduling. So Health and Human Services has already sent a letter to the DEA saying, we think cannabis should be a Schedule 3 drug, not a Schedule 1, which opens up medical research, which helps marijuana touching businesses, all this sort of stuff. We're just waiting on the DEA to either confirm or deny that. But what I'm showing you here on the screen, this is from Steve Cohen, sitting congressperson, and they're basically saying, what's the holdup? Deschedule this stuff. It's medicine. Now, personally, whether I believe that or not, but this gives you a sense for the large regulatory changes that are happening in 2024. And I think both of these are interesting because these are small niche areas of the financial landscape, and they're potentially going to plug into the traditional financial system. And this reminds me of something that I've seen a few times in my career now. What I'm showing you on the screen here, this is a chart from Paul Moyo at Yellowhook, one of my good friends. And what he's showing you here is this is the price of gold. And what we've got circled down here in 2003, this was the launch of the first gold ETF, GLD. Prior to this point in time, if you wanted gold, you'd have to go to a jeweler. Maybe you'd buy a mining stock, which isn't really gold exposure when you think about it. Finding bullion, you had to do it on the streets. What you would pay in terms of a markup or a markdown, no one knew what anything was worth. There was no pricing, no transparency, no liquidity, nothing. Then GLD comes out in 2003, and everything changes. Suddenly now you can put gold into portfolios very easy. You can trade pretty damn close to spot whenever you wanted to. And when this small niche area of the market, gold ownership, connected to the traditional financial rails, well, what we saw was mass adoption of gold in portfolios. It's now a regular tool that we use. In much the same way, I'm looking at the regulatory changes around cryptocurrency, Bitcoin specifically here, or cannabis, as following somewhat the same sort of pattern. But there's a trap here, right? If you're talking about regulatory change, I've got no earthly idea what the regulators are actually doing. This is not a financial problem. This is a political problem. And that brings us to our second point. Politics are involved in all of this. So I don't think it's any surprise that when you have an incumbent running in an election year, and he's fairly unpopular, and people's feelings about the economy and sentiment is pretty low, I think that increases the likelihood that we get regulatory changes. You got to do something. Whatever you think about Joe Biden, right? I'm neither pro nor against him. However, if you look at how he polls, his approval ratings, all the rest of that, he doesn't have too much to stand on here. However much he's accomplished, the public perception is probably significantly below maybe what he thinks his record is. So you've got to do something. And so I think that because we're in an election year and because of the unpopularity of our incumbent, I think that increases the odds of maybe throwing a Hail Mary, right? Young people would be very excited for cryptocurrency. There's a giant constituency that would be, very excited for legalized cannabis. So I could see these things, and in 2024. So it feels like a timely idea. So what does it all mean when we're talking regulation change? Well, big shifts can happen in asset classes as regulation changes. Think about that GLD chart. The GLD, the gold ETF, changed everything in the pricing of gold, in the usage of gold. I think the 2024 political environment increases the odds of regulatory changes. Basically, we got to do something. This is sort of like the Hail Mary idea. Two areas that I am focusing on for this sort of regulatory change, certainly it's going to be in the conversation later this year. It's going to be the Bitcoin ETF and cannabis rescheduling. And then fourth, finally, throwing some cold water. So I know you're all excited. You're going to run out and buy, Bitcoin and marijuana as soon as this video ends. But let me give you some cold water here. Until the regulatory change happens, consider these ideas as long shots, right? The danger is there have been numerous presentations very similar to this one saying the lawmakers are going to change any day now, and then it never occurs. In fact, that's the most likely outcome here, is that nothing changes regarding crypto or cannabis. So because of that, we don't want to be too early. It's okay to take a very small fringe position. We're looking at 1 to 2% ownership in some of our portfolio models on each of these ideas. But until the change happens, you want to be very careful here. So I'd consider them long shots. And most of our predictions, I tend to predict things that are not long shots. I would consider this one a long shot. So I think we're going to get some regulation change, but until then, don't hold me to these ones too hard. So there you go. That's the news review, regulatory change. I think if you got to this point of the video, I think you'll agree you found it pretty interesting. We'll see you for the weekend review.